Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Ollie Barrett. Hi, Ollie.
Hello Tanvi, it's 12:30 p.m. here in London, 1:30 across Central Europe. Coming up in the next half an hour, Julian Assange returns home, an American journalist goes on trial in Russia, and NATO's next chief is confirmed. First, the headlines.
Julian Assange returns to Australia from Saipan as a free man after pleading guilty for violating the US espionage law. Australia's Prime Minister Albanese thanks the United States and the United Kingdom for their help in Assange's release. Om Birla elected as Speaker of India's lower house again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says decision taken in the 17th Lok Sabha under his leadership will be called a golden period in the country's parliamentary history. Russia-Ukraine, each return 90 prisoners of war. This as the US reporter. Gershkovich's trial begins behind closed doors in Russia's Yekaterinburg on charges of espionage. And NATO picks Netherlands' Mark Rutte as the next chief, succeeding Jens Stoltenberg. Rutte to start office as Secretary General from 1st October 2024. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is a free man now. After a 14-year legal odyssey, Assange landed in Canberra on Wednesday, the moment he described as surreal. His return to Australia came after he pleaded guilty to a single felony charge for publishing US military secrets in a deal that secures his freedom and ends a long-fought legal battle. He faces no further prison time. Assange was pursued for leaking a vast amount of secret military information. Assange, who turns 53 on July the 3rd, was wished an early happy birthday by Chief Judge Ramona Mangaluna. Julian Assange's father earlier said that his son's release is a treasure, and he praised the Australian lawmakers for their support.
Really, that is the cherry on the top of a very, very handsome birthday cake, you know. That Julian can come home to Australia and see his family regularly and do the ordinary things of life is a treasure. I mean, life measured amongst the beauty of the ordinary is the essence of life.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese described Assange's release as a win for the country, which leveraged its security ties with both Washington and London to strengthen the case to resolve the plight of an Australian citizen.
Over the 2 years since we took office, my government has engaged and advocated, including at leader level, to resolve this. We have used all appropriate channels. This outcome has been the product of careful, patient and determined work I am very proud of. The Australian Government continues to provide consular assistance to Mr Assange as he returns home, as we do to Australians, for Australians right around the world.
Other Australian politicians and residents of Saipan supported WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange as he walked free from a court on the US Pacific Island territory.
You know, he's a journalist. It's his job to find things, and it's his job not to review his sources. We all know that.
It's really hard to take sides considering what's involved. Stealing secret documents, yet exposing corruption. It's a fine line, between is he good or bad. But on the whole, I think he's good. I think it's good for the people. Government doesn't like it, but I do.
I will flag, though, one alarming issue, and that is today, on US territory, a precedent was set for the charging and conviction of a journalist for doing their job. That is a really alarming precedent. It's the sort of thing we'd expect in an authoritarian or totalitarian country. It is not what we would expect from the United States or a similar country like Australia.
Former editor of Britain's Guardian newspaper, Alan Rusbridger, also opined that the plea deal could set a bad precedent for journalism.
Well, I think enough was enough. I'm pleased that he's been released. I'm sorry that it's taken a plea on a charge of espionage, because I don't think actually anybody thinks that what he was doing was espionage. But he's been in jail for long enough, and I hope that's the end of his potential. I hope that's the end of his own the punishment for what he did.
Now, Assange's release ends a 14-year legal saga in which he spent more than 5 years in a British high security jail and 7 years in asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And now, to understand the European perspective on Julian Assange's release, we are joined now by Arthur Sullivan from DW Berlin. Hi, Arthur. How have European leaders reacted to the plea deal struck with Assange?
Well, that's the thing. There's been curiously almost no public comment from the EU or from the leaders of European countries since this plea deal was struck earlier this week. Now, in some ways, you might say that is surprising, given how prominent the story of Assange and WikiLeaks has been for various national governments, including in Europe, for well over a decade. In other ways, it's perhaps not hugely surprising, given that Assange's fiercest critics have typically been governments, obviously the US, but also some of its European allies, who've accused him of being reckless with the leaking of sensitive material. One of the few public reactions from Europe came from Germany's foreign minister, that's Annalena Baerbock. She said Assange's case had moved people, quote, all over the world and had been discussed emotionally. That's a relatively muted but nonetheless positive response. And generally, Assange's case has received more sympathy from politicians on the left in Europe. Baerbock's sentiments, of course, quite similar to those of her coalition partner here in Germany, the Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who earlier this year said he hoped the UK would protect Assange from possible extradition to the US.
Arthur, it's a 14-year legal saga for Assange, which has finally come to an end today. How supportive has the EU generally been of Assange over the years?
It certainly has been a long saga and a lot of time to assess how the EU has been dealing with this particular story. They've been typically criticised by supporters of Assange down the years for not doing enough to lobby for his case. Now, despite the fact that it was, of course, originally Swedish prosecutors who sought his arrest over sex crime allegations, which has now been dropped, that investigation, and then it was the UK, as you mentioned, where Assange was held for so long. Despite those facts and that European involvement, European leaders have often sort of referred to the case as a US one, and they don't necessarily want to get too involved in what they call US matters. However, as I said, left-wing European politicians, including members of the European Parliament, they have been vocal supporters of Assange over the years. They've brought attention to his case. And 2 years ago, 40 MEPs got together to nominate Assange for the European Parliament's Human Rights Prize, the Sakharov Prize. Now, he didn't win it. It ultimately was won by the Ukrainian President Zelensky. But the fact that he was nominated showed the level of support he had amongst left-wing politicians here in Europe. And that same year, during a French election campaign, the French left-wing politician Jean-Luc Mélenchon, he said he would offer Assange French citizenship if he were to win the election. Again, a clear sign of how European support for Assange does appear to have been very closely tied to political affiliations.
Thank you, Arthur. Arthur Sullivan joining us from DW Berlin. Now, just as Julian Assange's trial has finally been closed, another journalist's trial from the Wall Street Journal, this time Evan Gershkovich, on espionage charges is underway in Russia. My colleague Ollie Barrett is in London. He takes it forward from me here, gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ollie, it's more weight as of now in Gershkovich's case?
Hello, Tanvi. Well, there has been a closed hearing as Russia begins that espionage trial of the reporter Evan Gershkovich. The Wall Street Journal journalist was arrested last year while on a reporting trip in the city of Yekaterinburg. He was later accused of spying for the CIA. The Russian prosecutor in the trial of Mr. Gershkovich claims to have proof that the reporter had been collecting secrets about a Russian defense enterprise for the US's CIA agency. He and the Wall Street Journal and the United States all strongly deny the claims. Now, in the most recent of several sporadic exchanges, Russia and Ukraine have each returned 90 prisoners of war. Russia claims the repatriated prisoners had been in grave danger while in captivity. Ukraine says the returnees included soldiers who defended the Azovstal steel mill in 2022, as well as others captured when Russian forces briefly took control of the decommissioned Chernobyl nuclear plant. The United Arab Emirates facilitated this swap as an intermediary. DD India's Dasha Chernyshova has more from Moscow. NATO has agreed to appoint Mark Rutte as its next Secretary-General. The outgoing Dutch Prime Minister will take over as chief of the Security Alliance. Rutte's appointment was sealed by NATO ambassadors during a meeting at the 32-nation alliance's headquarters in Brussels. He will assume his functions as Secretary-General from the 1st of October 2024. After declaring his interest in the post last year, Rutte gained early support from key members of the alliance, including the US, Britain, France and Germany. Russia says it will block 81 European Union media outlets in retaliation for the bloc's ban against 4 Kremlin news organizations last month. The ban will restrict people inside the country from accessing the outlets' online resources and broadcasting materials. The outlets from 25 European countries, including pan-European media like Politico, French outlets such as AFP, Le Monde and Libération newspapers, among others. Russia accuses the organizations of systematically distributing inaccurate information about the ongoing conflict. Now, 16 Nobel Prize-winning economists say Donald Trump's policies would fuel inflation. A jointly signed letter warns the US and the world economy would suffer if Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump won the US presidential election in November. It claims the economic agenda of the US President Joe Biden, a Democrat, is, in their words, vastly superior to Donald Trump's. In response, the Trump campaign says the economists are out of touch and blamed Joe Biden for current high inflation. The group of economists say that Trump's economic plans would reignite inflation in part because of his pledge to impose stiffer tariffs on Chinese imports. They say that would hike prices on many goods bought by US consumers. And with that, Tanvi, back to you.
Thank you, Ollie. Ollie Barrett joining us from London, still to come on DD India Global. Kenya wakes up to the wreckage of burned cards after deadly anti-tax protests. Police guard the parliament. Citizens say they are disappointed by the government's response. And revelers get set up at England's Glastonbury as the Glasgow Music Festival starts, with star singers slated to perform.
stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Moving on to East Africa now, where military was deployed in Kenya to quell the demonstrations escalating against the new tax proposals. At least 23 people were killed and another 30 being treated for bullet wounds sustained after police fired live rounds at protesters trying to storm Parliament on Tuesday. Now, police has stood guard near the government building, in the backdrop of which President William Rutte made a statement in which he said that all means would be deployed to thwart any attempts by dangerous criminals to undermine the security and stability of our country. Protests against an unpopular finance bill, which includes several tax rises, have been ongoing for days. But they escalated on Tuesday as MPs passed an amended bill.
It is not in order or even conceivable that criminals pretending to be peaceful protesters can rain terror against the people, their elected representatives, and the institutions established under our Constitution, and expect to go scot-free. We must isolate crime from democratic expression and separate criminals from people exercising the freedom of expression and divergent opinion. I assure Kenyans that we shall provide a full, effective, and expeditious response to today's treasonous events.
Meanwhile, the Indian High Commission in Kenya's Nairobi issued an advisory for Indian nationals to exercise utmost caution, restrict non-essential movement and avoid the areas affected by the protests and violence till the situation clears up. Earlier, when Kenya witnessed turmoil, its police officers arrived in Haiti, marking the beginning of a United Nations-backed mission to combat powerful armed gangs that have wreaked turmoil in the Caribbean country. More than 80% of the city has fallen under the control of gangs. The Kenyan police are the first contingent of an international force in Haiti that is anticipated to reach about 2,500 police from 15 other countries. However, there is still a lack of concrete detail regarding the goals and actions of the latest mission. A previous UN mission, which lasted from 2004 until 2017, did little to improve the conditions on the island. In a wake-up call to South Asia, the World Health Organization has reported that about 45% adults are at the risk of disease due to physical inactivity. According to WHO, nearly 31% of adults worldwide and 45% in South Asia are not doing enough physical activity. Physical inactivity among adults has increased by about 5% between 2010 and 2022. Ongoing trends suggest that levels of inactivity are projected to further rise to 35% worldwide by 2030. The highest rates of physical inactivity were observed in the high-income Asia-Pacific region and South Asia. The study was undertaken by researchers from the World Health Organization together with academic colleagues. And next we take a look at what else is happening around the world. The pre-trial detention of two Russian journalists, Konstantin Gabov and Sergei Karelin, was extended by Moscow's Basmany court. The journalists are accused of participating in activities related to YouTube channel called Navalny Live. The 8th China-Eurasia Expo opened in Xinjiang International Convention and Exhibition Center on Wednesday. The exhibition aims to showcase the development opportunities brought by China's Belt and Road Initiative. The event will come to a close on June 30th. The Spanish authorities are conducting a search operation for the missing British teenager Jay Slater on the Tenerife island. The teen went missing last week after attending a music festival on the island. And next updates from India. Bharatiya Janata Party MP Om Birla has been elected as the Speaker of the lower house of Indian Parliament on Wednesday. The NDA candidate was elected as the Chair of the lower house for the second consecutive time. Following the win, Om Birla was congratulated by Prime Minister Modi and Leader of Opposition Rahul Gandhi, both of whom escorted him to the Speaker's chair. The 18th Lok Sabha witnessed a rare contest for the Speaker's post on Wednesday between Bharatiya Janata Party BJP's Om Birla and K. Suresh of the Congress after the National Democratic Alliance NDA government and the Indie group of opposition parties failed to arrive at a consensus. However, Om Birla was elected by voice vote as the opposition did not demand for division. Praising Om Birla's previous term, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that under his term during the 17th Lok Sabha, many historic decisions were taken.
हम सब चाहते हैं कि सदन में आचरण, सदन के नियमों का पालन हम सब करें और आपने बड़े सटीक तरीके से, संतुलित तरीके और कभी-कभी कठोरता के साथ भी फैसले लिए हैं। मैं जानता हूं कि ऐसे निर्णय आपको पीड़ा भी देते हैं, लेकिन सदन की गरिमा और व्यक्तिगत पीड़ा में आपने सदन की गरिमा को पसंद किया और सदन की परंपरा को बनाने का प्रयास किया। ये साहसपूर्ण काम के लिए भी आदरणीय अध्यक्ष जी, आप अभिनंदन के अधिकारी हैं।
And now let's take you to England's Glastonbury Music Festival. Started by a dairy farmer, Michael Eavis, in 1970 and affectionately known as Glasgow, the Glastonbury Music Festival kicked off on Wednesday in England. Music enthusiasts arrived in thousands to attend the event, which will feature Afrobeat sensation Burna Boy, rapper Little Sims, American electro rock group LCD Sound System, English singer PJ Harvey and K-pop group 17. The show will end on Sunday with R&B singer SZA's performance. So a lot lined up for the Glastonbury Music Festival in England. So that's all for this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can catch all the latest news and updates on our DD India mobile app. So we will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team here in New Delhi and elsewhere around the world. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.